Welcome to Christ and Culture. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about a subject I talked about before in previous episodes, and that is the New York State's diabolical new abortion law that they now have in New York State, which basically gives a woman the right to abort her baby up until the moment of birth. So she can be going along, getting a bassinet, getting a crib, getting all of the equipment for a baby to be brought into the home. She can be telling everyone that she's having a baby, that she's due at such and such a time. She can be preparing friends and family. She can be telling her employer that she's not going to be into work for a number of months because she has a baby due, and up until the very moment she can go in for a pregnancy, for a delivery, and then at the last split second she can decide that she doesn't want that baby, and then those doctors and nurses who were attending to her live birth, they all leave, and a new set of people come in and actually abort that baby 1 minute, 1 second before she would have given delivery of that healthy baby. That's what New York now has on their books. They allow that to happen, and it's such a diabolical law that I couldn't help but do a program on it. Well, today what I want to do is talk about why it is never, ever necessary to have a late-term abortion. And I'm going to use the commentary of Matt Walsh, the Christian commentator, who has done a very excellent job of explaining this all on his Daily Wire podcast. So we're going to hear from him. But you might say, well, why keep talking about this subject? Because it's depressing, it's negative, it's discouraging, it's not something that is fun and easy and light and positive to talk about. Why do we keep talking about this subject? Well, one, we're in the month of January when I'm doing this program, and this is the anniversary of the infamous Roe v. Wade decision. So every year, I make it a point to make sure that I cover this terrible topic of abortion because we need to continue to keep it into the public discussion. We need to continue to work to pass laws against it. We need to continue and put the pressure on politicians to reverse Roe v. Wade. And things like this late-term abortion legislation are coming. We already see New York has passed this outrageous late-term abortion law, and now Virginia is even considering a bill that would allow basically, essentially, the same thing as New York. So you have a number of these liberal states who are now lining up to pass these ultra-liberal abortion laws when they gain power in their assemblies or congresses. And they are doing this as a preemptive strike in case, as insurance, against the possibility that there might be some kind of reversal of Roe v. Wade, and they want to make sure that they are not affected at all. And that's one of the sad things about the situation that we have here in the United States today, is that even if Roe v. Wade is reversed, which is something we're praying for, we're working for, we're doing everything we can to make sure that happens by appointing Supreme Court justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade. Even if it is overturned, that does not end abortion in the United States, unfortunately. What would happen is each state would then have to come up with its own policy for abortion, and that's what we see some of these states doing. So what they're basically saying to everyone is, it doesn't matter what you do, conservatives, it doesn't matter what you do, Christians, it doesn't matter if you reverse Roe v. Wade, because even if you do reverse Roe v. Wade, it won't stop anything in our state. New York State will not miss a beat in killing unborn children. It will not miss a beat in murdering innocent children in the womb, even if a Supreme Court were to reverse the infamous Roe v. Wade decision. It would not stop it. Now, what it would do is give states that wanted to end abortion the right to do it. And there are states that are getting ready to do that. And we've seen that in a number of different states. They're fighting and clawing to try to do that in preparation for Roe v. Wade reversal. But right now, we're seeing these progressive states, these liberal far-left states, lining up to try to preemptively block any stoppage of abortion, even if Roe v. Wade is reversed. But there is no reason why late-term abortion ever really needs to happen. And so I want to have Matt Walsh explain that now, and then I'm going to come back at the end of the program and talk a little bit more about this topic. So let's watch Matt Walsh right now.
Now, yesterday we talked about the barbarous, inhuman law that was just passed by the New York State legislature, which makes abortion legal through every stage of pregnancy. And I explained yesterday how this law indeed will give women the ability, the power to get an abortion at any time, at any point in their pregnancy, up till birth, for any reason. Now, the language of the law does stipulate that late-term abortions are reserved for women who have health concerns, or in order to protect a mother's health. But that language is so intentionally vague that it could apply to any situation at all. As I said, are we talking physical health, emotional health, psychological health, financial health, spiritual health? It seems like any and all of those could qualify. Besides, abortion is never actually necessary to protect a woman's health or her life. So anytime that qualifier is put into the law, that means that there's something else going on, because that category of abortion doesn't actually exist. So what are they really doing there? Obviously, they're just providing a very kind of vague way for anyone to get an abortion. As long as so maybe in New York, if you're a woman, you want to get an abortion at 30 weeks or 32 weeks or whatever, you might have to couch your reason in terms of health, but that's really it. And I think that this point is really crucial. I know that I hammered it yesterday, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but it's important that we stop and appreciate just how gratuitous and how unnecessary late-term abortion actually is. Because the way that the left talks about it, the way that abortion advocates talk about it, they're going to say that, well, nobody even gets late-term abortions unless they really need it. So they act like late-term abortions are the most necessary forms of abortion, as in nobody would ever get something like that unless they absolutely needed it. Well, that's not true at all. Of course, all abortion is gratuitous, and all abortion at any stage in any form is unnecessary and evil, but that's especially the case with a late-term abortion. Because, here's the reason why. Because a woman in the third trimester, if she wanted to or needed to end her pregnancy, she could easily do it without killing the baby. So even with an abortion, if she's getting an abortion in the third trimester, she's going to have to go into labor and delivery either way. If she gets an abortion, that means that the baby is going to be killed 1 or 2 days before labor and delivery. But you could just cut that step out, which is a dangerous step for the mother as well, by the way. You can just cut that out and deliver the baby. You have a C-section and you're good to go. Take the baby out and boom, the pregnancy's over. It could be over in a few minutes. That extra step of killing the baby is completely unnecessary. It is just murder, that's all. There's no reason to do it. Even in a situation where a woman legitimately does have to end her pregnancy because of some serious health complication, Those situations happen. There's no reason, though, to directly kill the baby ahead of time. You could talk to any real doctor, anyone who's or any nurse who's worked in the labor and delivery departments of a hospital, and they'll talk about, they've plenty of situations where you have these emergency situations where you got to get the baby out. Yeah, that does happen. It's rare in any individual case, but overall it happens kind of frequently. But what they'll tell you, if they're being honest, is that there's never been a situation where they had to directly kill the baby in the process. Why would you ever have to do that? There may be plenty of situations where you can't save the baby, sadly, tragically, despite your best efforts, but you have to directly kill it? Why? So killing the baby ahead of time is just, it's not only is it evil and terrible and awful, which all abortion is, but it's also, it's just as evil and just as unnecessary and just as egregious as killing the baby after the birth. There's no difference. There's no difference at all. None. Not even a slight difference. There is not even a slight difference between late-term abortion and post-birth abortion. And I would challenge any pro-abortion person to come up with an argument against post-birth abortion that would not also apply to late-term abortion. You can't do it. Or come up with an argument for late-term abortion that would not also apply to post-birth abortion. You can't do it. In fact, you really can't come up with an argument for abortion at any stage that would not also apply to born infants. Let's think about this. There are really only 4 arguments, okay? There are 4 arguments for abortion, and they're all bad arguments, but these are the arguments, okay? There are really no other arguments. Number one, the number one main argument now is the woman's autonomy has to be respected. It's what the woman wants to do. The baby is dependent on her and on her body and on her life, and she has a right to autonomy, so she should be able to express that right, enjoy that right whenever she wants. And so if she decides that, you know what, I don't want this baby being dependent on me anymore, then that's it. So that's the number one argument, autonomy. Number 2, they'll say that the fetus, scare quotes around fetus, is not fully developed, and thus it's not a real person. Number 3, they'll say the fetus is dependent on his mother, and thus not a person. And number 4, they'll say sometimes the other argument is, well, if the fetus is not aborted, it will just become an unwanted child, and we already have enough of those to deal with, right? So those are the 4 arguments. Autonomy, not fully developed, thus not a person. Dependent, thus not a person. Overpopulation. So those you go. There you go. That's the whole argument for abortion. Every single one of those arguments, every single one, applies just as much, if not even more, to post-birth procedures, let's call them. So it's a matter of drawing lines, right? You got to decide where to draw the line. And the point that pro-lifers have been making all along is that we got to draw the line somewhere. The only sensible place to draw the line is at conception. To draw the line there and say you cannot kill the babies in the womb. Once conception has occurred, now you have a distinct, separate, living entity, which in the first few moments and days and weeks after conception might not look like a fully grown and developed person, but this is a distinct human entity, a person. And that's the only sensible place to draw the line. That once you have that human living entity, you got to draw the line there. You can't kill it. If you don't draw the line there, then you're left with, there is no other non-arbitrary place to draw it. And if you're not going to draw it at conception, there is no reason at all to draw it at birth. Nothing really changes at birth. That's the thing. Nothing really changes at birth other than now the baby is in a different location. It was inside the mother before, now it's outside. So what? What difference does that make? There's no reason to draw the line there. There's no reason to draw it in the moments after birth either. There's no reason to draw it in infancy. Um, if a woman decides to keep her post-birth fetus for a while, she's still going to discover that this creature is an enormous strain on her body, on her time, on her energy, on her life. In fact, the infant is much more an imposition on her autonomy than it was while it was inside her body. Anyone who's had an infant knows this. Anyone who's had it, when you have an infant in the house, do you feel like an autonomous person? No, because you've got this infant that you have to take care of constantly. At least while the baby's inside your body, you don't have to, the process mostly takes care of itself, right? But with an infant, it's like every waking moment you're taking care of this baby, you're accounting for the baby. You got to wake up in the middle of the night and feed it, and you're changing its diapers, and you got to buy diapers. You got to start buying all these things. So now there's that financial strain as well. An infant is, as much as I said, as much an imposition on a woman's autonomy and the father's autonomy, if he's involved. Hopefully he is, as the baby was while it was still inside the mother's body. So what if a mother decides, what if she comes to the conclusion after, say, 2 months or 6 months that motherhood actually is not the best decision for her? What if she decides that, she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to structure her entire life around this baby. She doesn't want to have to feed the baby. She doesn't want to do these things. It's her life, right? She's autonomous. What if she gets a major job offer and discovers that the infant fetus it makes it difficult for her to thrive in her new position? Or even that with this baby, she can't even accept the position. Or what if 1,000 other scenarios? It's none of our business anyway, right? Don't want a post-birth abortion, don't get one. Isn't that the slogan? So arguments 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I outlined above, they all still hold in this case. The infant fetus interferes with her autonomy. It is not fully developed. It is completely dependent. And now that it's unwanted, it has become a member of an overcrowded category. So why shouldn't she be able to consult with a licensed physician and make a decision that's best for her? Besides, post-birth abortions happen all the time anyway. You can make them illegal, but it's not going to stop them from happening. They still are going to happen. That's just the reality of the world. Isn't it better for there to be a safe and sanitary facility provided rather than for her to have to do it in a back alley or in a bathtub or something? And we can't draw the line either there. So there's no reason to, if we're going to allow abortions of infants in the womb, there's no reason to not allow them of infants outside of the womb. And there's also no reason to disallow abortions of toddlers or toddler fetuses or adolescent fetuses, because these fetuses also continue to make demands on a woman's autonomy. They are also wholly dependent on their parents. They're also underdeveloped physically. Thus, apparently, they're not people in the strictest sense. So what if a woman discovers that motherhood is the wrong choice for her when her, fetus turns 4 or 6 or 8 or just enters middle school? If we don't draw the line anywhere in the child's utero development, then why draw it during its post-utero development? And on what basis? Now, am I suggesting that if we accept abortion, then we may as well allow a woman to abort her fetus at any age whatsoever? No, of course I'm not saying that. Don't be silly. Because once the fetus graduates high school, and it becomes independent, emancipated, it's fully grown, it's gotten through puberty, now it is a fully grown entity. And so now I think there is the possibility that we could consider it a person, but only a possibility. Because we've already agreed, remember, that personhood is based on a fetus's physical development and on its ability to care for itself. So what about, for example, a 23-year-old disabled individual? What about an adult on welfare? What about someone who's homeless? What about someone who's sick and elderly? What about those who are physically developed but never reach the intellectual development that could rightly afford them a claim to personhood? Clearly, according to abortion advocates, we cannot in good conscience continue to consider all of them to be people. Those are just fetuses too. By the way, remember, fetus is just Latin for offspring. So that's all that is. That's all that means. So those are also offspring that, according to arguments 1, 2, 3, and 4, cannot be considered people and should be candidates for abortion. Now, it's easy to say that I'm making a straw man here, right? Or I'm engaging in a slippery slope fallacy. Well, it is a slippery slope, but it's not a fallacy. In fact, it's a fallacy to say that every slippery slope argument is a fallacy. That's not true. Because sometimes you are on a slope and sometimes it is slippery. That's just the fact. And the point here that I'm trying to illustrate is that I can take all of the arguments for abortion, all of them, and I can take them fully intact, and I can, preserving their integrity, if I can call it that, and I can take them over here, and I can apply them to infants, to toddlers, to adolescents, to the disabled, to people on welfare, to people who are intellectually stunted, to the elderly, and so on. I can really apply all of those arguments to all of those groups. That should trouble you as a pro-abortion advocate. Because if you can look and say, wow, okay, all of my arguments could easily be used to justify the Holocaust, then that means that either your arguments are bad or your position is bad or both. That's the whole point of a slippery slope argument. That's why a slippery slope argument can be a very legitimate argument. Because the whole point is to show you, if I can take your argument, whatever argument you made, if I can take it intact and use it to justify something that we all agree is horrible, then there's something wrong with your argument. Or there's something wrong with your position. Now, in this case, there are no other arguments available for abortion, so that means there's just something very wrong with your position. Your position is bad. It's terrible. It's evil.
Well, as you can see, the argument for late-term abortions doesn't work. There's no sane, rational argument for late-term abortions. It's all just raw power that these politicians want. They want to cater and pander to the feminist, the so-called progressive liberal agenda, and they want to use abortion to do that. There is no rational, sane reason why the baby must die. And as Matt Walsh has expressed really eloquently, there is great harm done, obviously, to the baby. They're killed. But there's also the potential of great harm to the mother if these abortions are undertaken. So the best health-wise way to deal with some complication or anything would be to go ahead and have the baby, because the baby has to come out, like he said, and it doesn't have to come out dead. It doesn't have to come out aborted. It might as well come out alive. And the only reason why it would ever need to have an abortion is not actually a rational reason. It's just a subjective, personal desire on the part of the mother to not have the child. In other words, kill the baby, murder the baby in the womb because the mother doesn't want the baby. It's not that the baby can't live outside the womb. It's not that the mother could not raise the child. It's that the mother would not raise a child. She doesn't want to raise that child. She doesn't want that baby. And we all know that there are options in that situation for her to go ahead and have the child and then put it up for adoption, because there are parents who are willing. There are parents on the waiting list right now who would gladly, in a heartbeat, take that baby, that healthy baby, and bring it into their home and raise that child and care for it as their own, as it would be. There are plenty of couples who cannot conceive and cannot have children who would love the opportunity to raise that baby. So there's no practical reason why that baby should not be born. It's perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong. And so it would simply be the will of the mother to murder that child. Now, New York State and now Virginia, it looks like, if this bill is passed in Virginia, evidently want to give the mother the power over life and death. This is outrageous. No citizen in our country should ever have the right of life and death over another citizen. Now, sure, we do capital punishment. Some states allow for the death penalty, but that's because the person who is facing the electric chair or the firing squad or the lethal injection, it's because that person has done some heinous crime. They are guilty of a crime. And that crime that they're guilty of is first-degree murder. That's why they're on death row. That's why they're facing the death penalty. It's not that they're innocent. They are guilty. They have taken someone's life. And so death penalty is perfectly allowable. The biblical precedent is in the Old Testament, and then the New Testament does nothing to contradict it. We see the Christian faith has never been against the death penalty, except certain sects, like, for example, the Amish are against it. The Anabaptists at the time of the Reformation might have been it. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them could have been against it. And without these exceptions, it's a pretty much uniform belief in the Christian faith that the death penalty is warranted in certain situations like first-degree murder and so on. So there's no Christian precedent for banning the death penalty. But for abortion, you're talking about taking the life of an innocent person, the person in the womb, the baby, the most vulnerable, the most innocent person in the world, hasn't even sinned one time yet, hasn't committed any kind of offense to anyone, no crime, nothing bad, and you're going to allow for that innocent person to be murdered in the womb because the mother doesn't want to bring it into the world? I mean, there's no sense to that argument. And so what we see is not only we have a grave moral crime being committed by New York State and other states following it, but we have a great act of irrationality because it doesn't even make sense logically. It doesn't even, there's no argument that you can give that is compelling as to why society should tolerate this situation where a mother can decide at the last second to kill her baby. So the baby would be born normally, but a minute before birth, the mother decides it's too much, I don't want it, and boom, they stab a knife into the baby and kill it. It doesn't make sense. It's totally irrational. So I hope this presentation, even though it's been negative, I hope that it's something that we can learn from. And when someone starts talking about the great New York State abortion law, you have the ammunition now to tell them otherwise.